This is the day the Lord has made, and we again are rejoicing and glad therein. This is Meditative Monday with Bishop AMMoore. We're godly, excited, and consider it a privilege again to have this opportunity. We've been studying this word called grace, this word called grace, this word called grace. I think all of us need to recognize and realize that we are grace cases, that we're being kept, and we're kept by the grace of God. I want to take a look this morning at a very interesting passage that we find in Scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse number 9. First, 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse number 9. And we're asking you to go ahead, use your social platform like I'm doing as we speak to share, to tag, to tell, to text others to help us continue to promote this time of meditative training, this time of meditative training. You are what you think on the most. You are what you think on the most. So go ahead, tag, tell, text somebody if you will. Tag, tell, text others as we spend time this morning meditating on this word grace. And I think I'm going to go ahead and make this formal because I believe without hesitation or reservation, all of us are grace cases, that whatever we've survived, whatever we've overcome, whatever we've made it through, it's been by the grace of God, the favor of God, the involvement of God, taking His power, His ability, and His influence to help us. Starting with verse 7 and concluding at verse 10 in this particular chapter of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul talks about the thorn in the flesh, the thorn in the flesh, the thorn in the flesh. But in verse 9, he says something after he's asked the Lord to take this away from him. He says something amazing. And in that 9th verse it says, and he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. And he said, red writing, this is God speaking to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Now, there are always key words, key terms to help us understand the before and the after of what was going on. Obviously, Paul was being affected by this, but let's unpackage it. We know that grace in this text is translated as charis or favor. And it means when someone takes their power, their ability, their influence to assist you. My grace, my favor is sufficient, is enough. The word sufficient means enough. He says, for you, for my strength. The word strength is the word dunamis in the text. It means for my power, my explosive power, to break down and to break through barriers, okay, is made perfect, is made complete in weakness, your sickness or your disease. The word weakness, sickness or disease. So we know that from Paul's perspective, we know that it was something physical. We know that it was some type of ailment that consistently nagged and challenged him. He says now, my grace is sufficient for you. You know, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect. Where? In weakness. Now this gives credence and value to when Paul also goes along and says that we give thanks in everything and not not necessarily for everything. So I'm not thanking him for the sickness, but what I've learned how to do is thank him in the midst of it. So God says, I still have the power that is necessary to allow you to function, to flow, and to flourish. Come on. Say, even in my sickness, even in my weakness, I'm going to function, I'm going to flow, and I'm going to flourish. Come with me this morning. Even in my sickness, even in my times of affliction or challenge, I'm going to function, I'm going to flow, and I'm going to flourish. Come on, come on, come on. I need you to get this, because sometimes I think that we've been allowed to believe that everything is going to always be peaches and cream. Everything is going to always be peaches and cream. And we know that reality is not true. I was on Pastor Taria's Instagram page, and she was talking about how sometimes this Christian walk can be challenging, can be difficult. And we don't have to deny the facts. We declare our faith, expect his favor, expect his involvement. Expect him to show up and demonstrate who he is, even in the midst of what we're going through. You've been built for this. Okay? So now God never puts on you what he hadn't put the grace in you to be able to handle. God never puts on you what he hadn't put the grace in you to be able to handle. God never puts on you what he hadn't put the grace in you for you to be able to handle. So now you can handle this. You can handle this. You can handle it. I don't know what your this is. You don't know what my this is, but I tell you that my this is my this. You know, the things that I face, the things that I deal with, and you do likewise. And I think sometimes we've learned to be pretentious in the faith, to act like everything, and you don't want to tell nobody what you're going through, and all of those type of things. I get it, been there, and sometimes I'm still challenged in that area. But in the midst of it, facing various challenges on different levels, Paul reminds us this morning that God's grace is sufficient for you. Says, that emphatically, yes, you're not in this. My strength, okay? So he takes ownership. So he says, my strength is made perfect. That word perfect, made perfect, made complete in even weakness, in sickness and diseases. Okay? So now God says, I don't have just power when you're up. I have power when you're going through. Good God from Zion. I have power even when you're going through. And there ought to be others that are able to witness that when others have had to face what you face, the results have possibly been different. The outcome has been different. Listen, just to have a sane mind sometimes in the midst of the things that some of us face and go through, that's sufficient grace. That's sufficient grace. You know, that you hadn't lost your mind. You hadn't given up. You hadn't thrown in the towel. You hadn't forsaken the assignment, because God has been giving you power to complete the assignment, even in the midst of whatever sickness, whatever weakness that you might be dealing with, whatever disease. So we're not denying the reality that things are happening, but we are declaring that God's grace is sufficient. That God's grace is sufficient for me. For my strength is made perfect, even in weakness. Even in weakness this morning. I don't know how you feel about that this morning, but the reality is God's grace is still enough. Okay? God's grace is enough. God's favor is enough. You know, Paul still wrote most of the New Testament, at least 13 to 14 books in the entire 27-book collection of the New Testament. And so now I've come to encourage some and to prepare others, because some of us are already in it, and some of us are being prepared before we have to face it, that God's grace is not only amazing, it's sufficient. If you have His grace, you have His power, His ability, His influence to be effective in your situation. And so don't you hang your head down. Don't you give up. Don't you give out, because you're about to come out. This is still Major March, and God is doing yet some amazing things to show you who He is, to show you what He's capable of doing, to get us over, to get us out, and to get us through these even challenging times. And so I want to make a declaration. I want you to meditate really on this scripture today, because yours might not be physical. That was Paul. Yours might be emotional. Yours might be mental. Yours might be environmental. I don't know what it is, but Paul was specifically addressing the one that was given so much, entrusted with so much. But what it also tells us is that none of us, no matter how great we are, how much we've been trusted with, we don't have something that we have to wrestle with. If you go and read that passage or the beginning of the chapter, Paul talked about that before I be lifted above measure, this was allowed to be because he had the revelation. Okay, so when you look at the people that you look up to, you admire, what you can also be sure of is they have some challenge, they have some obstacle, they have something that they're dealing with. None of us are immune from having to face something. But when you're facing it with God, being with you, being a partner in this with you, you can be sure that the outcome is going to be in your favor. Okay, so as I come out of this, I'm coming out with things working in my favor, working in your favor. So let's close this out this morning and pray that the technology that we're working with continues to improve and be enhanced in reference to that. You all know I'm particular about time and starting on time and things of that nature. But in the midst of it, certain things are just out of our control right now. So we'll believe in God for some upgrades with the technology in reference to our presentation. We love you much. We thank God for you joining us again on this morning. Thank you, Nolan. We appreciate each and every one of you. I just want to make it simple, keep it clear. God's grace, I want you to declare this 10 times. I want you to read the text 10 times. God's grace is sufficient even in a Waski's weaknesses. Okay? God's grace is sufficient even in a Waski's weaknesses. God's grace is sufficient even in a Waski's weaknesses. God's favor is enough even in the midst of your sickness and disease. Okay? God's grace is sufficient even in the midst of your weaknesses, even in the midst of your weaknesses, even in a Waskit's weaknesses. Yes, God's grace is sufficient even in a Waskit's weaknesses. God's grace is sufficient even in a Waskit's weaknesses. So as you go out knowing that you're still going to function, you're still going to flow, and you've been assigned to flourish. You're going to function, you're going to flow, you're going to flourish. This is still Major March, and God is still doing some amazing things. So don't let what you see deceive you to denounce what you're declaring to be displayed in your life. Okay? Don't Don't let what you see deceive you. Cause you to announce what you declare to be displayed in your life. God loves you. I love you also. Have a fantastic Monday. We'll see you here at 6 a.m.